Hi everyone. At the beginning of the Torah portion this week, at the beginning of the parasha, it says that God appeared to Abraham. It doesn't mention really any communication, but the sages tell us that it was immediately after the circumcision, which was at the end of last week's Torah portion, and now God comes to visit Abraham. And I think this alone is an important message. Sometimes when you're visiting someone who needs a pick-me-up, someone who's sick or someone who's depressed, it's not so much about what you say, it's just about being there, or what I call a ministry of presence. And I think the Torah is teaching us this lesson, that sometimes you don't need to say anything to cheer someone up, you just need to be with them. And right away, three men, or angels disguised as men, come to visit Abraham. And what does he say? He turns to God and says, if I find favor in your eyes, wait here, right? Don't leave me. And then Abraham goes and takes care of these men. Now it's very strange, because if God came to visit you, you would think if someone knocked at the door, you wouldn't say to God, can you just wait a second while I take this call? I remember when call waiting, came out, for those of you who might be a little bit older, and it was like, and it still is to some extent. People see it as rude to put someone on hold to go talk to someone else. You're basically telling God to be on hold. And here, actually, one of the commentators, they say a very powerful statement. They say, we learn from here that it's greater to welcome strangers into your home than it is even to greet God. And in Hebrew, that's gadol hachnasat orchim mikabalat pnei hashchina. It's greater to welcome people than it is to welcome God. But what does this mean? How is that possible? How is it possible for one to argue that it's greater to welcome people than it would be to welcome God into your life? And I think the answer, if you think about it, is actually fairly obvious. And I don't know, if everyone watching this, so I know most of the people watching this don't have children. But if you do, you understand that one of the most difficult things about having children is watching your kids fight. We're all children, so maybe you can all relate to that to some extent, even if you don't have your own children. But think about when you fought, your brothers and sisters. It was so stressful for the parents. When I watch my kids fight, there's nothing worse. And when my kids get along, so I can put up with a lot of stuff, but when they fight, forget it. I go crazy. And it's the same thing, I think, with God. We are all children of Hashem. And when God looks down at this world and he sees people getting along, that is how we express our relationship to God. In other words, a person cannot turn to God in prayer and study the Torah and try to have a relationship with God without having a relationship with people. In other words, our vertical relationship is very much dependent on our horizontal relationship. Our relationship with God is expressed through our relationship with people. So it's not that it's greater than, but that's how we express our relationship to God. In other words, when Abraham welcomes people into his home, that's how he's expressing his divine spark. Whereas the godly spark is expressed through this idea. And I want to just end with a very powerful story. I don't know if it's true, but it doesn't matter. The story is told about two brothers that came from a very poor family, and the father sent them out, the older one out to work, and he was very, very successful. Then the younger one got a little bit older. He went out to work, but he was a miserable failure. He couldn't find a job, and he was going from one thing to another, and he didn't make he couldn't make ends meet. So he said he had an idea. He went to speak to his older brother. He went to visit his older brother, and he went into the office, and the brother just essentially ignored him as if he didn't exist. He looked at him in the eye, and he said, I don't know who you are. And he totally ignored his brother like he didn't exist. And the younger brother was so upset he couldn't believe it. How could his older brother not recognize him? How could he not, help him out? And his brother threw him out of the office, and he said, I have no idea who you are, and he threw him out. A few months later, the older brother and the younger brother both got letters that their father was sick, and they went to visit their father on his deathbed. And the older brother was standing on one side, the younger brother on the other side of the bed, and the father was only talking to the younger brother. After about an hour, the older brother said, Dad, I'm here too, you can recognize me. So the father looked at the older brother, pointed to the younger brother, and he said, if he's not your brother, then I cannot possibly be your father. If he's not your brother, then I cannot be your father. And I think Hashem, God, looks at us in the same way. That if we can't get along with each other, if we can't treat each other with respect, welcome people into our homes, help people who need help, then God looks at this world and he says, if you guys can't get along and you can't act as brothers, then how can I possibly be your father? And I think this is a very important lesson we learn from Abraham, that Abraham understood that his relationship with God was very much dependent on his relationship with people. Shabbat Shalom, and have a wonderful week. May this be the greatest Shabbat of your life, at least until next week.